A young waiter humiliated by an arrogant millionaire keeps a secret that could change everything. When his hidden origins come to light, they both discover a truth that will force them to confront their past and their own prejudices. Lucas wiped the tables with quick but precise movements, trying hard to keep up with the frenetic pace of the most exclusive restaurant in the city. At just 22, he had learned to navigate the haughty glances of the wealthy clients who frequented the place, aware that to them he was invisible, little more than a pawn in their luxury theater. But tonight would be different. Tonight, Lucas would no longer be invisible. At one of the central tables, Rafael Montes, a businessman known for both his fortune and his arrogance, was dining with a group of partners. His every word rang with authority, and his every gesture seemed designed to reinforce his dominance over the world around him. Lucas approached with an elegant tray, carrying a dish that one of the partners had enthusiastically ordered. "What's this?" Raphael roared as he saw the plate in front of him, his voice cutting through the murmur of the room like a knife. Lucas hesitated, surprised. "Excuse me, sir, it's Mr. Garcia's order, the risotto of—" "I'm not talking about him," Raphael interrupted, raising his voice and pointing to his own wineglass. "I'm talking about this. Are you incapable of serving a wine worthy of this table?" Eyes began to turn toward the scene. Customers at neighboring tables stopped, curious and bewildered. Lucas felt the heat rising up his neck, but he tried to keep his composure. "My apologies, sir. I can bring you another wine immediately." "Another mistake and you're out," Raphael said with a brusque gesture. From the opposite end of the room, Mariana Montes, Raphael's daughter, watched the scene with a mixture of shame and disgust. She had learned to tolerate her father's eccentricities, but this display of superiority in front of someone who clearly couldn't defend himself crossed a line. When her eyes met Lucas's, she noticed something more than simple discomfort. There was a spark of determination, an internal struggle not to be defeated. Lucas, for his part, clenched his fist behind his back. He wanted to say something. He wanted to defend himself, but he knew that one wrong move could cost him the job he so desperately needed. As he hurriedly retreated to the kitchen, Mariana decided to get up from the table and follow him. In the kitchen, Lucas was taking a deep breath, trying to regain his calm. Mariana entered with determined steps, leaving her father at the table, still surrounded by partners who laughed uncomfortably at the spectacle. "I'm sorry about my father," Mariana said softly. "He had no right to treat you like that." Lucas looked up, surprised by the gesture. "Don't worry," he replied, his voice full of formality, but his eyes still reflecting the humiliation he had suffered. Mariana didn't insist, but something inside her told her that that night had been the beginning of something deeper. The night continued at the restaurant, but for Lucas, the incident with Raphael continued to resonate like an uncomfortable echo in his mind. He moved around the room with automatic movements, avoiding at all costs getting close to the businessman's table again. However, he couldn't help but notice how Mariana, Raphael's daughter, was watching him out of the corner of her eye, as if she was trying to decipher something that went beyond the incident. After a tense farewell, Raphael and his group finally left the restaurant. As they walked out, the businessman fixed his gaze on Lucas, but this time, something caught his attention. Under the collar of the young man's shirt hung an antique medallion that faintly shone with movement. Raphael stopped dead in his tracks. "That medallion," he murmured, but his voice quickly took on a more severe tone. "Where did you get it?" Lucas, surprised by the question, instinctively brought a hand to the pendant, covering it. "It's mine, sir. Something that has always belonged to me," he replied firmly, although his tone showed a certain discomfort. "Since always?" Raphael frowned as if he were trying to connect pieces of a puzzle. "That medallion is identical to the one I had." "Mr. Montes, I don't think this is the time for interrogations," Mariana interrupted, placing herself between them. "Besides, it's already late." Raphael looked at her, annoyed, but ended up giving in with a snort. However, as he left the place, his mind was still caught in the shine of the medallion. It was impossible to ignore the detail. That object was identical to the one his younger brother, Diego, always carried before disappearing years ago. Lucas, for his part, felt a chill. It wasn't the first time someone had noticed his locket, but it had never provoked such an intense reaction. Now in the quiet of the kitchen, he took out the pendant and looked at it closely. It was his only link to a past he had never been able to understand. Raphael's words echoed in his head, awakening questions he didn't know how to answer. Mariana, meanwhile, decided to stay in the restaurant for a few more minutes. She watched Lucas from a distance, intrigued by both his presence and her father's mysterious interest in that medallion. "Is it special to you?" he asked as he approached, breaking the silence. Lucas quickly put the pendant under his shirt. "Let's say yes. It's the only thing I have from my biological family." The answer left Mariana thoughtful. Although she knew little about her father's past, the fragments she had heard about her uncle Diego's disappearance began to echo in her mind. For the first time, she felt there was something deeper connecting Lucas to her own family. The next day, Lucas arrived early at the restaurant. The previous night had been a whirlwind of emotions and unanswered questions. As he arranged the chairs and prepared the tables, he couldn't stop thinking about Raphael's words. Why had this powerful man been so interested in his medallion? Paula, the restaurant manager, noticed that Lucas was quieter than usual. She approached with a calm smile, as she always did when her employees seemed worried. "Lucas, is everything okay? I notice you're distracted." He looked at her for a moment, wondering if he should open up. Paula had always been understanding, almost like a mother figure to him. Finally, he decided to trust her. "Something strange happened last night. Mr. Montes, one of the clients, noticed my medallion." He paused, pulling the pendant out from under his shirt. "He asked me where I got it, as if I recognized it." Paula looked at the locket, a small, worn object, but with intricate engraving that denoted antiquity. "He's beautiful. What do you know about him?" Lucas sighed, caressing the cold metal between his fingers. "Nothing really. My adoptive parents gave it to me when I was a child. They said I was wearing it when they found me at the orphanage. It's the only thing I have from my real parents." Paula nodded empathetically. She knew Lucas didn't talk much about his past, but this little detail explained a lot about his reserved nature. "Maybe there are more people who can give you answers," she suggested carefully. Lucas didn't answer, but Paula's words got him thinking. What if there really was a connection between that medallion and the man who had humiliated him the night before? Meanwhile, Mariana couldn't get what had happened out of her head. There was something about Lucas that intrigued her, and it wasn't just his story or his medallion. It was his silent strength, the way he faced each day despite the difficulties. Determined to find out more about him, she showed up at the restaurant early, long before the usual time. Lucas was in the kitchen organizing some ingredients when she appeared at the door. "Good morning," Mariana said with a shy smile. Lucas looked at her, surprised. "Good morning. I didn't expect to see you so early. I wanted to talk to you. My father was very rude last night and, well, I want to know more about you." Lucas frowned. Although Mariana seemed sincere, he was tired of people from that social class trying to investigate his life as if it were a charity project. "There's not much to tell," he replied, looking back at his work. "I'm just a waiter trying to get by." Mariana was not intimidated. "I saw your locket last night. It's identical to one my uncle Diego had. It disappeared many years ago." Lucas raised his head, surprised. "Your uncle?" "Yes. That's why I want to know more about you. It could be important, both for you and for my family." Lucas hesitated, but something in Mariana's eyes made him trust her. Perhaps for the first time, there was a chance to discover the truth about his origins. Rafael Montes sat in his large office, surrounded by windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. However, that morning, the landscape offered him no comfort. In his hand, he held an old photograph, faded by time, in which he appeared with his brother Diego. They were both young, smiling, and around Diego's neck hung a medallion identical to the one he saw on Lucas the night before. The image evoked memories that Rafael had tried to bury for years. Diego had disappeared in an accident when they were both barely adults. It had been a devastating blow for the family, especially for Rafael, who always blamed himself for not being able to protect his younger brother. Now, the memory of the medallion made it impossible to ignore a question that tormented him. How had that object ended up in the hands of a young waiter? No matter how hard he tried to focus on the documents on his desk, his mind kept returning to the same scene. The shine of the locket, Lucas's defiant expression, and the strange feeling of familiarity that washed over him as he looked at it. His assistant entered with a cup of coffee, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Montes, you have a meeting in 20 minutes, he announced professionally. Raphael nodded but didn't respond immediately. As the assistant left, he leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. He had spent much of his life building an empire, making sure his name was synonymous with success. But now, faced with this new mystery, he felt vulnerable, even small. That vulnerability did not go unnoticed by Mariana, who arrived home just in time to notice her father's blank stare during lunch. She had spent the morning researching the family archives and could not ignore the coincidences between Lucas and the story of her Uncle Diego. "Dad," Mariana began cautiously, "I want to talk to you about what happened last night at the restaurant." Raphael looked up, his eyebrows furrowed. "There is nothing to talk about. That young man made a mistake, and I overreacted." "I'm not talking about that," Mariana insisted. "I'm talking about the medallion he was wearing. You said it was identical to my Uncle Diego's." Raphael's face hardened, as if he wanted to avoid the subject. "It's a coincidence. There's no point in reliving the past." "What if it's not a coincidence?" Mariana pressed, her tone a mix of curiosity and defiance. "That boy said he doesn't know his biological parents. There could be a connection." Raphael let out a sigh, but didn't respond immediately. For the first time in years, the possibility that Diego or his legacy were alive forced him to question the priorities he had maintained all his life. "I'll look into it," he finally replied, in a dry but determined tone. Mariana nodded. She knew she had planted a seed in her father, though she couldn't predict how far it would lead. Deep down, Raphael was afraid that the answers would threaten everything he had built. Mariana was not one to be content to wait. After the brief conversation with her father, she knew that he would act slowly, perhaps too slowly to solve the mystery surrounding Lucas and the medallion. So she decided to take matters into her own hands. She spent the morning in the family library exploring old photo albums and documents her grandmother had jealously guarded. She found more images of Diego, always wearing the medallion around his neck. She also discovered newspaper clippings that chronicled his disappearance. A car accident on a remote road, a body never found. The family had given up all hope of finding him alive, but Mariana had always felt that story was incomplete. The clippings offered little more than bare facts and press speculation. One clue did catch his eye, however. A report mentioned that a group of rescuers had found the wreckage of the vehicle on a slope, along with some scattered belongings. Among them was a medallion similar to Lucas's, though the article made no mention of its fate. Mariana decided to dig deeper into the documents. She searched the internet for the name of the orphanage where Lucas had grown up, hoping to find some record or clue. With some persistence, she managed to contact an older woman who worked at the institution. "Wait, Lucas? Yes, I remember that boy," the woman on the phone said. "He was very small when he arrived. I think he was found near a road after an accident, but no one claimed his family." Mariana's heart raced. The coincidence was too great to ignore. "Do you have any records on him? Something that could help me learn more about his past?" "You would have to look in our archives, but I must warn you that we have very little left." While Mariana waited for the orphanage's reply, she decided to visit the restaurant again. When she arrived, she found Lucas on his break, sitting at one of the farthest tables, staring at his medallion as if he were searching for answers in its engraving. "Don't you get tired of that pendant?" Mariana joked as she sat down in front of him. Lucas looked up, but didn't smile. "It's the only thing I have from my family. If there's one thing that connects me to them, it's this." Mariana took a breath before answering. "I think there is more to it than you imagine. I have been investigating, and there are too many coincidences between your story and that of my Uncle Diego." Lucas frowned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the accident that lost your family could be the same one that caused my uncle to disappear. And if that's true, you might be closer to your roots than you thought." Lucas's face showed a mixture of surprise and disbelief. He didn't want to get his hopes up, But something in Mariana's words compelled him to listen to her. "If there's even the slightest chance that you're right, I want to know more," she said finally, with determination. Mariana smiled. She had taken the first step towards connecting two stories that seemed destined to intersect. Mariana knew that the truth could not remain hidden for long. After days of insistence, she convinced Lucas to participate in a meeting with her father at the restaurant. Although the young man was initially reluctant, his curiosity and desire for answers overcame his distrust. The night of the meeting, the restaurant was closed to the public, which gave the place a strange, empty air. Lucas arrived early, dressed in his usual uniform, although this time he seemed more tense than usual. Mariana was waiting for him next to a carefully arranged table, trying to keep the atmosphere as neutral as possible. "My father will be here soon," Mariana said, trying to break the silence. "I just want you to be patient. He is not an easy person, but I think this is important for both of us." Lucas nodded without saying a word. The idea of facing the man who had humiliated him was still uncomfortable, but the possibility of answers kept him going. When Raphael entered, the tension in the room instantly increased. The businessman, dressed in an impeccable black suit, walked with firm steps toward the table. His gaze alternated between Mariana and Lucas, although this time there was no arrogance in his expression, but something more complex, a mixture of curiosity and caution. "What does all this mean, Mariana?" asked Raphael, giving his daughter a stern look. "Dad, we need to talk," Mariana replied in a determined tone. "There are things we can't ignore, and I think Lucas could be the key to understanding them." Raphael sat down, watching Lucas closely. For a moment, no one spoke, until the businessman broke the silence. "That medallion you're wearing, I want to know where you got it." Lucas stood firm, though his voice betrayed a slight tremor. "I was given it when I was a child. I was found near a road after an accident. It's the only thing I have from my family." Raphael frowned, processing Lucas's words. Mariana stepped in to fill in the gaps. "Dad, I did some research. That accident happened at the same time and in the same place where my uncle Diego disappeared." The words seemed to hit Raphael like an avalanche. He leaned back in his chair, his mind connecting pieces that had remained scattered for years. "Are you saying that?" he murmured, looking at Mariana and then at Lucas. "We don't know for sure," Mariana interrupted, "but it is a possibility." Lucas took the floor with a mixture of excitement and skepticism. "If there is anything you know about that accident or about my family, I want you to tell me." Raphael took a deep breath before speaking. "My brother Diego disappeared in a similar accident. He was wearing a medallion like yours. We thought he was dead, but we never found his body." The silence that followed was thick, laden with pent-up emotions. Lucas looked at Raphael, searching for some hint of truth in his words. "And what does that mean?" he finally asked, trying to maintain his composure. "It means you could be—" Raphael paused as if the word was difficult to pronounce. "My nephew." The statement struck like a bolt of lightning, leaving Lucas speechless. Mariana watched the scene with her heart racing as the three of them faced the possibility that their lives were more intertwined than they ever imagined. The air in the restaurant seemed to have stopped. Raphael's statement left Lucas stunned, and for the first time in a long time, the questions he had carried for years seemed to have a direction. However, disbelief weighed as much as possibility. "How can you be so sure about that?" Lucas asked, crossing his arms, a mix of skepticism and hope in his tone. "Just because I'm wearing this locket doesn't mean I'm your nephew." Raphael looked him straight in the eyes. There was something in the young man's gaze that was eerily familiar, but he forced himself to remain calm. "You're right, we can't be sure yet. But the locket, your story, the dates, they're not coincidences." Mariana interrupted, gently taking Lucas's arm. "Lucas, I know this is hard to believe, but I think we need to find evidence, something that confirms or rules out this possibility." Lucas nodded, though he was still tense. "What kind of tests?" "A DNA test," Raphael suggested firmly. "It's the only thing that will give us a definitive answer." The silence that followed was interrupted only by the sound of Lucas's breathing. The idea of finally finding out the truth was tempting, but also terrifying. If it turned out to be true, it would change everything he thought he knew about his life. If not, it would only open a deeper wound. "Okay," he finally said with a sigh. "If that gives us answers, I'll do it." Raphael nodded, relieved, but showed no emotion. It was as if he was afraid to expect too much from the situation. For him, the idea of recovering a part of his lost brother was as exciting as it was painful. A week later, the DNA test was carried out in a private laboratory. The days that followed were an emotional whirlwind for everyone. Mariana tried to remain optimistic, accompanying Lucas whenever she could. For his part, Raphael avoided talking about the subject, immersing himself in his work as a way of controlling his anxiety. Finally, the day of the results arrived. Mariana and Lucas met in Raphael's office, where a sealed envelope was waiting on his desk. The atmosphere was tense as Raphael opened the document with shaking hands. "Here it is," he murmured, while his eyes ran over the words printed on the paper. Her face changed immediately, and though she tried to maintain her composure, a single tear rolled down her cheek. "It's true," he said, his voice breaking. "You're Diego's son." Lucas felt as if the world was shaking beneath his feet. For years, he had dreamed of knowing his origins, but he never imagined that he would be so connected to someone like Rafael Montes, the man who had humiliated him days before. "So what happens now?" Lucas asked, not knowing how to process the information. "Now, we need to talk," Rafael replied, slowly standing up. "There is much you need to know about your father and our family." For the first time, Rafael's usual harshness seemed to have vanished. There was a sincerity in his tone that Lucas hadn't expected. As Rafael began to talk about Diego, Lucas felt the pieces of his life finally starting to fall into place. He couldn't erase the past or the wounds, but perhaps this discovery was the beginning of something new, something worth exploring. The DNA result had confirmed what everyone feared, and at the same time hoped for. Lucas was the son of Diego, Rafael's long-lost brother. However, what should have been a moment of reconciliation was far from simple. Lucas was uncomfortable with the idea of being part of the Montes family. Although he had gotten answers about his origins, Rafael's past actions still weighed on his mind. The memory of the initial humiliation, coupled with the gap between their worlds, made accepting this new reality difficult to digest. One afternoon, while resting after her shift at the restaurant, Mariana found him sitting at one of the empty tables, with the medallion in his hand. "Looking at the locket again?" he asked in a tone that tried to be light. Lucas looked up at her, but didn't smile. "Now I know where it comes from, but I'm not sure that changes anything." "Why not?" Mariana asked, sitting down in front of him. "You have a family, Lucas. My father is willing to accept his mistakes, to change." Lucas shook his head. "Your father humiliated me without a second thought. To him, I'm just a waiter. I don't know if I can trust someone who treated me like that." Mariana sighed, understanding his frustration. "My father made mistakes, I know that. But what happened doesn't define who you are or who you can become. You deserve answers. You deserve a connection with your family." Lucas remained silent, his gaze fixed on the locket. He had spent years imagining what it would be like to find his family, but this reality was nothing like what he had dreamed. The next day, Raphael decided to take the initiative. He invited Lucas to his office, a place that symbolized his success and power, but which now seemed too cold a space for such a personal conversation. "Lucas," Raphael began bluntly, "I know you have your doubts about me, and I don't blame you. I've been an arrogant man, and I've made mistakes, but I want to make amends. Not out of obligation, but because what we discovered has changed me." Lucas looked at him, keeping a neutral expression. "And how do you plan to do that? With money? Because I'm not interested." Raphael shook his head. "It's not money I want to offer you. I want to get to know you. I want you to be part of our family if you're willing to try." The sincerity in Raphael's voice took Lucas by surprise, but he wasn't ready to give in. "I don't know if I can forgive you so easily." "I'm not asking for your forgiveness right now," Raphael replied solemnly. "I just want you to give me a chance to prove that I can change." Silence filled the room, and though Lucas didn't respond, Raphael felt there was a small window of opportunity. He knew the road to reconciliation would be long, but he was willing to take it. That night, Lucas reflected in solitude. He didn't want to be carried away by fleeting emotions. But something about Raphael's insistence and Mariana's kindness made him question his own barriers. Maybe, just maybe, it was worth a try. Rafael Montes knew that words were not enough to heal the wounds he had caused, both to Lucas and to his own conscience. That is why he decided to act. He needed to do something bigger than an apology, something that would show that he was willing to change and build a genuine bond with his nephew. The opportunity came when he heard about a community project that Lucas had briefly mentioned during a conversation with Mariana. It was a program to train young people in vulnerable situations, offering training in gastronomy and hospitality. It was a dream that Lucas had always had, although he had never imagined he would be able to realize it. Raphael decided to invest in that dream. Without telling Lucas, he met with the project leaders and offered to finance it completely. He didn't do it as a showy gesture, but as a way of showing his commitment. He wanted to support Lucas in something that really meant something to him, without imposing conditions or expecting anything in return. A week later, Lucas arrived at the restaurant for his usual shift, but upon entering, he noticed something different. Mariana was waiting for him with a knowing smile and a spark of enthusiasm in her eyes. "What's wrong?" Lucas asked suspiciously. "Come with me, I want to show you something," Mariana replied, guiding him towards the main room. There he found Raphael surrounded by a group of young people and some representatives of the community project. A banner hung on the wall, announcing the start of a new phase of the program, a training workshop in gastronomy that would take place in the restaurant after business hours. Lucas was stunned. He looked at Raphael, searching for an explanation. "What is this?" Raphael stepped forward, his expression serious but sincere. "This is for you. I know you want to help other young people like you, and I want to support you in that." Lucas looked at him, still suspicious. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want to show you that I'm willing to change," Raphael replied firmly. "I can't change the past or erase what I did to you, but I can help you build something for the future." The room fell silent as everyone waited for Lucas's response. For a long minute, he didn't say anything. Finally, he let out a sigh. "This doesn't change everything, but thank you." Raphael nodded, accepting Lucas's words as a small step towards reconciliation. In the following days, the restaurant began to transform into something more than just a luxury venue. In the evenings after closing to the public, it became a learning center for young people looking for an opportunity. Lucas became fully involved in the project, working as a mentor and sharing his experience with the students. Raphael, for his part, attended regularly, watching Lucas with pride. He didn't expect immediate recognition or thanks. He knew that trust is built over time, and he was willing to wait. For Lucas, seeing Raphael get involved in something so significant slightly changed his perception of him. Although he couldn't forget the past, he began to consider the possibility that the arrogant man who had humiliated him could become someone worthy of respect. The restaurant had changed. It was no longer just a place for the rich, but a space where dreams began to be built. Every night, the young people attending the training program filled the room with energy and enthusiasm, learning skills that would change their lives. Lucas, at the center of it all, had become a natural leader, guiding with patience and dedication those who looked to him as an example. However, the path to reconciliation with Raphael was not yet complete. Although the relationship had improved, there was a wall of mistrust that Lucas could not completely break down. He knew that Raphael's gesture had been meaningful, but he still feared that it might all be a strategy to redeem himself rather than a genuine intention to connect. One evening, at the end of a long day, Raphael stayed at the restaurant after all the apprentices had left. He watched Lucas organize the tables and clean the dining room with a dedication that reminded him of his own brother Diego, someone who always put passion into what he did. "Why are you still here?" Lucas asked, breaking the silence. Raphael stood up from the chair where he had been sitting, approaching with slow steps. "I wanted to talk to you without interruptions." Lucas looked at him, still with some suspicion. "About what?" Raphael sighed as if he were gathering the strength to say what he had been thinking about for weeks. "About what this really means to me. I don't want you to think I'm doing this to make myself feel better or to make up for my mistakes. I'm doing this because I want to get to know you, because you're part of my family, even if I haven't known how to show you that before." A week later, Lucas arrived at the restaurant for his usual shift, but upon entering, he noticed something different. Mariana was waiting for him with a knowing smile and a spark of enthusiasm in her eyes. "What's wrong?" Lucas asked suspiciously. "Come with me, I want to show you something," Mariana replied, guiding him towards the main room. There he found Raphael surrounded by a group of young people and some representatives of the community project. A banner hung on the wall, announcing the start of a new phase of the program, a training workshop in gastronomy that would take place in the restaurant after business hours. Lucas was stunned. He looked at Raphael, searching for an explanation. "What is this?" Raphael stepped forward, his expression serious but sincere. "This is for you. I know you want to help other young people like you, and I want to support you in that." Lucas looked at him, still suspicious. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want to show you that I'm willing to change," Raphael replied firmly. "I can't change the past or erase what I did to you, but I can help you build something for the future." The room fell silent as everyone waited for Lucas's response. For a long minute, he didn't say anything. Finally, he let out a sigh. "This doesn't change everything, but thank you." Raphael nodded, accepting Lucas's words as a small step towards reconciliation. In the following days, the restaurant began to transform into something more than just a luxury venue. In the evenings, after closing to the public, it became a learning center for young people looking for an opportunity. Lucas became fully involved in the project, working as a mentor and sharing his experience with the students. Raphael, for his part, attended regularly, watching Lucas with pride. He didn't expect immediate recognition or thanks. He knew that trust is built over time, and he was willing to wait. For Lucas, seeing Raphael get involved in something so significant slightly changed his perception of him. Although he couldn't forget the past, he began to consider the possibility that the arrogant man who had humiliated him could become someone worthy of respect. The restaurant had changed. It was no longer just a place for the rich, but a space where dreams began to be built. Every night, the young people attending the training program filled the room with energy and enthusiasm, learning skills that would change their lives. Lucas, at the center of it all, had become a natural leader, guiding with patience and dedication those who looked to him as an example. However, the path to reconciliation with Raphael was not yet complete. Although the relationship had improved, there was a wall of mistrust that Lucas could not completely break down. He knew that Raphael's gesture had been meaningful, but he still feared that it might all be a strategy to redeem himself rather than a genuine intention to connect. One evening, at the end of a long day, Raphael stayed at the restaurant after all the apprentices had left. He watched Lucas organize the tables and clean the dining room with a dedication that reminded him of his own brother Diego, someone who always put passion into what he did. "Why are you still here?" Lucas asked, breaking the silence. Raphael stood up from the chair where he had been sitting, approaching with slow steps. "I wanted to talk to you without interruptions." Lucas looked at him, still with some suspicion. "About what?" Raphael sighed as if he were gathering the strength to say what he had been thinking about for weeks. "About what this really means to me. I don't want you to think I'm doing this to make myself feel better or to make up for my mistakes. I'm doing this because I want to get to know you, because you're part of my family, even if I haven't known how to show you that before." Lucas remained silent for a moment. His hands rested on a table, and his gaze was fixed on an indefinite point. Finally, he spoke. "It's not easy to trust you, Raphael, not after the way you treated me. But I'm starting to believe that you really do want to change." Raphael nodded, accepting Lucas's sincerity. "I understand. I don't expect everything to be solved right away, but I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going to give up on this opportunity to have you in my life." The conversation marked a turning point. Although wounds do not heal overnight, both began to build something more solid. Lucas, little by little, allowed Raphael to participate more in the project, and in the process, he began to know him in a different way. Months later, the restaurant, once a symbol of exclusivity, was now known for its social impact. Clients of all kinds began to frequent it, attracted not only by the food, but by the history behind the place. Raphael, for his part, became a champion of the project, using his resources and influence to expand it to other cities. Lucas finally found a place he could call home, not just because of the restaurant, but because he had begun to accept Rafael and Mariana as part of his life. Although the road had not been easy, he understood that forgiveness and connection were possible, even in the most difficult circumstances. One night, as the restaurant was closing, Rafael and Lucas shared a last glass of wine in silence. No words were needed. In that moment, they both understood that, although the past could not be changed, the future was full of possibilities. History teaches us that appearances can be deceiving, and that pride and prejudice often keep us from what really matters: human connections. What would you do if you discovered that someone you despised was actually part of your own family? Would you be able to acknowledge your mistakes and seek forgiveness? Or would you let pride keep you from redeeming yourself? Click on the video on screen to continue this journey of self-discovery and reflect on how our actions can change our lives and those of those around us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that inspire you and invite you to reflect on the decisions we make every day. See you in the next video.